Yes, good evening. Let's try again. We have the early evening news in Denmark. I just made 6 videos. I've been out shopping, eating chips. It's 6 p.m. and the sun starts to get down. Yes, when I'm sleepy, I click the mouse by mistake. It's because it's very hot in my apartment always, and I'm very sleepy always. Of course, it's too hot in the night. So I will keep my hands away from the mouse.
Although they managed to sink a carrier, the battle was a disaster for the Japanese, as all 3 carriers that were committed to the battle would now be unavailable for the operation against Midway. 110. After Coral Sea, the Japanese had 4 fleet carriers operational: SRY, Kiga, Akijai and Hyrie, and believed that the Americans had a maximum of 2 Enterprise and Hornet. Saratoga was undergoing repair after a torpedo attack, while Yorktown had been damaged at Coral Sea and was believed by Japanese naval intelligence to have been sunk. She would sortie for Midway after just 3 days of repairs. Midway. Hyrie under attack by B-17 Flying Fortress heavy bombers. Admiral Yamamoto viewed the operation against Midway as the potentially decisive battle of the war, which could lead to the destruction of American strategic power in the Pacific. 112, and subsequently opened the door for a negotiated peace settlement. 110. Through strategic and tactical surprise, the Japanese would knock out Midway's air strength and soften it for a landing by 5,000 troops. 110. After the quick capture of the island, the combined fleet would lay the basis for the most important part of the operation. Yamamoto hoped that the attack would lure the Americans into a trap. 113. Midway was to be bait for the U.S., which would depart Pearl Harbor to counterattack. When the Americans arrived, he would concentrate his scattered forces to defeat them. An important aspect of the scheme was Operation L, which was the plan to seize 2 islands in the Aleutians, concurrently with the attack on Midway. 110. However, in May, U.S. intelligence echo daybreakers discovered the planned attack on Midway. Yamamoto's complex plan had no provision for intervention by the American fleet before the Japanese had expected them. Planned surveillance of the American fleet in Pearl Harbor by long-range seaplanes did not occur as a result of an abortive identical operation in March. Japanese submarine scouting lines that were supposed to be in place along the Hawaiian Islands were not completed on time. 114. The battle began on the 3rd of June, when American aircraft from Midway spotted and attacked the Japanese Transport Group 700 miles, 1,100 kilometers, west of the atoll. 115. On the 4th of June, the Japanese launched a 108 aircraft strike on the island but failed to deliver a decisive blow to the island's facilities. 116. Most importantly, their strike aircraft based on Midway had already departed. Adding to the 116 carrier aircraft on their way to attack the Japanese. The aircraft from Midway attacked, but failed to score a single hit. In the middle of these uncoordinated attacks, a Japanese scout aircraft reported the presence of an American task force, but it was not until later that the presence of an American carrier was confirmed. 116. Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo was put in a difficult tactical situation. 117. After quick deliberation, he opted for a delayed but better prepared attack on the American task force. 117. However, beginning at 10:22 am, American SBD Dauntless dive bombers surprised and attacked 3 of the Japanese carriers. 117. SRY, Kiga, and Akijai were turned into blazing wrecks. A single Japanese carrier, Hyori, remained operational, and launched an immediate counterattack. Both of her attacks hit Yorktown and put her out of action. Later in the afternoon, aircraft from the 2 remaining American carriers found and destroyed Hyori. The crippled Yorktown along with the destroyer Haman were sunk by the Japanese submarine I-168. With the striking power of the Kido Butte I having been destroyed, Japan's offensive power was blunted. Early on the morning of 5 June, the Japanese cancelled the Midway operation. 118. New Guinea and the Solomons. Japanese land forces continued to advance in the Solomon Islands and New Guinea. From July 1942, a few Australian reserve battalions fought a stubborn rearguard action in New Guinea, against a Japanese advance along the Kokoda track towards Port Moresby. The militia were relieved in late August by troops from the 2nd Australian Imperial Force. In early September 1942, Japanese Marines attacked a strategic Royal Australian Air Force base at Milne Bay, near the eastern tip of New Guinea. They were beaten back the Allied forces, the first defeat of the war for Japanese forces on land. 119. On New Guinea, the Japanese on the Kokoda track were within sight of Port Moresby but were ordered to withdraw to the northeastern coast. Australian and US forces attacked their fortified positions and after more than 2 months of fighting in the Bunaguna area finally captured the key Japanese beachhead in early 1943 Guadalcanal. US Marines rest in the field during the Guadalcanal campaign in November 1942. Allied forces became aware through coast watchers of a Japanese sea airfield under construction at Guadalcanal. 120. On the 7th of August 1942, 16,000 U.S. Marines landed on Guadalcanal and Chileji in the Solomons. Vice Admiral Gunishi Mikawa, commander of the newly formed 8th Fleet at Rabaul, quickly sailed to engage the Allied force off the coast of Guadalcanal. On the night of 8-9 August, Mikawa's quick response resulted in the Battle of Sava Island, a brilliant Japanese victory during which 4 Allied heavy cruisers were sunk, 118, while no Japanese ships were lost. It was one of the worst Allied naval defeats of the war. 118. The victory was mitigated only by the failure of the Japanese to attack their vulnerable transports. Had they done so, the first American counterattack in the Pacific could have been stopped. The Japanese originally perceived the American landings as nothing more than reconnaissance. 121, with Japanese and Allied forces occupying parts of the island. Over the following 6 months, both sides poured resources into an escalating battle of attrition. U.S. air cover based at Henderson Field ensured American control of the waters around Guadalcanal during daytime, while superior night fighting capabilities of the IJN gave the Japanese the advantage at night. In August, Japanese and U.S. carrier forces engaged in an indecisive clash known as the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, resulting in the sinking of the light carrier Ryujo. In October, US forces successfully challenged the Japanese in night fighting during the Battle of Cape Esperance, sinking one Japanese cruiser and one destroyer for the loss of one destroyer. During the night of the 13th of October, two Japanese fast battleships Kongo and Haruna bombarded Henderson Field. The airfield was temporarily disabled but quickly returned to service. On the 26th of October, Japanese carriers Shikaku and Zukaku sank USS Hornet, CV-8, and heavily damaged Enterprise in the Battle off Santa Cruz Islands. The loss of Hornet, coupled with the earlier loss of USS Wasp, CV-7, to the I-Jane submarine I-19 and heavy submarine damage to the USS Saratoga, CV-3, in September, meant that US carrier strength in the region was reduced to a single ship, Enterprise. However, the two IJN carriers had to retire to home waters. From 12 to the 15th of November, Japanese and American surface ships engaged in fierce night actions in the naval Battle of Guadalcanal, one of the only two battles in the Pacific War during which battleships fought each other. Two U.S. admirals were killed and two Japanese battleships sunk. During the campaign, most of the Japanese aircraft based in the South Pacific were redeployed to the defense of Guadalcanal. Many were lost in engagements with the Allied air forces. Japanese ground forces launched repeated attacks on heavily defended U.S. positions around Henderson Field but suffered appalling casualties. To sustain these offensives, resupply was carried out by Japanese convoys, termed the Tokyo. Expressed by the Allies. The convoys often faced night battles with enemy naval forces in which the depended destroyers that the IJN could ill afford to lose. Fleet battles involving heavier ships and even daytime carrier battles resulted in a stretch of water near Guadalcanal becoming known as Iron Sound from the multitude of ships sunk. However, the Allies were much better able to replace these losses. The Japanese evacuated the island and withdrew in February 1943. In the 6-month war of attrition, the Japanese had lost as a result of failing to commit enough forces in sufficient time. 122. By late 1942, Japanese headquarters had decided to make Guadalcanal their priority. Contrarily, the Americans, most notably, U.S. Navy Admiral John S. McCain Sr., hoped to use their numerical advantage at Guadalcanal to progressively drain Japanese manpower. Ultimately, nearly 20,000 Japanese died on Guadalcanal compared to just over 7,000 Americans. Stalemate in China and Southeast Asia. China 1942-1943. Chinese troops during the Battle of Changde in November 1943 in mainland China, the Japanese 3rd, 6th, and 40th Divisions, a grand total of around 120,000 troops, massed at Yueyang and advanced southward in 3 columns, attempting again to cross the Milua River to reach Changsha. In January 1942, Chinese forces scored a victory at Changsha, the first Allied success against Japan. 123. After the Doolittle raid, the IJA conducted the Zhejiang-Jiangxi campaign, with the goal of locating surviving American airmen applying retribution on the Chinese who aided them, and destroying air bases. This operation started on the 15th of May 1942 with 40 infantry and 15-16 artillery battalions, but was repelled by Chinese forces in September. 124. During this campaign, the IJA left behind a trail of devastation and engaged in biological warfare, spreading cholera, typhoid, plague and dysentery pathogens. Chinese estimates put the death toll at 250,000 civilians. Around 1,700 Japanese troops died, out of a total 10,000 who fell ill when Japanese biological weapons infected their own forces. 125, 126, 127, on the 2nd of November 1943, Izumi Yokoyama, commander of the Imperial Japanese 11th Army, deployed around 100,000 troops to attack Changde. 128. During the 7-week Battle of Changde, the Chinese forced Japan to fight a costly campaign of attrition. Although the Japanese captured the